Basically, we had some audio trouble check systems verification methods. We got it, so we're good. So today is a special day because we last time what we've done is we kind of dived into the criminal aspects of AIPA, which required us to get back on the bottom of the ocean, if you will. But today we are going again take a bird's eye view on the situation that pertains to the international trade. And my colleague and a friend Ken Bear prepared a special situation which is very timely, called COVID and international trade patterns, which is right there. But before we get there, what I want to do is I want to make a couple of announcements. They're gonna be short, but nevertheless I think they are important because they pertain to international trade and they kind of relate to what we're going to talk about today. And let me put it on the screen. All right, so the first one is the rollout by Baker and McKenzie. They're rolling out a webinar series this month. So December just started, and they're going to focus on specific regions that take place in various countries throughout East Asia. They also include Australia, but as you can see, they are mostly East Asian countries, and how the international trade economy has been affected. Another event is also the December 9th event, but also by Baker and McKenzie, which is more politically oriented and speaks about the U.S. administration and how the role of the U.S. administration will affect the international trade. The next one, and this is mostly pertinent to attorneys because it deals with international arbitration, but nevertheless I think everyone who is involved in international trade, specifically and particularly folks who are importers, folks who are exporters, those folks who are in charge of drafting the contract agreement, I think this is a good webinar series to attend. The first one actually kicked off today, but there will be a series of them, and they are free to register. You just have to sign in and click, and you'll be there. So this is a good resource, and it is especially applicable whenever we deal with contractual clauses. Very oftentimes, whenever we do the contract, whenever we do the we all heard about Incoterms, for example, and we all heard about the commercial invoice because we deal with this on a regular basis through the stream and through the customs broker training classes. However, not less important is the arbitration clause, because it can serve as a powerful tool to resolve the disputes, and it can also be a deterrent from filing a lawsuit in a court. So this is out there. The links will be provided, and once the stream is over, the links will be posted in the menu screen. of various sites. So now going to the presentation, focusing on COVID and the international trade patterns. Information about the presenter, Martin Kenber, and with his contact information. And of course, this is a disclaimer, and this is for informational purposes only, because every situation is case by case basis. Ken, so should we start from this slide? Can you explain something a little bit about this link? Because I know that we talked about it. You were very excited to find it and work with it. What's going on with that one?
Well, right now we have the world is dealing with the COVID-19 virus, and it's devastating. I've had it affect my family. I know many friends. I know many people who have been hurt by the COVID virus, and it's affecting not just people, but it's affecting business, and in particular it's affecting international trade. And I've gotten all kinds of questions about where can we find out more about what's happening in terms of COVID and international trade. I came across something not too long ago, and this is why I'm showing a toolbox. And you can go online, you can make use of this tool, online tool, for free, and you can find out what's going on with trajectories, or what's happening with certain types of items that are being traded, being imported and exported. You can find out about their trajectory. Many of you may know where to access information about international trade. Businesses should be safeguarding international trade information, but there are a lot of exporters, importers out there, companies that don't know where to go for information, and nor do they know how to protect their trade information. Well, customs authorities all over the world have been sharing information, and information goes to private entities, and information gets filtered. And in many cases, the trade information is actually purchased by the governments who are giving information to these companies. We have some companies here in the U.S. that if you're going to be involved in trade, take notice of them. And we have one located right in the city of New York. It's called Panjiva, www.panjiva.com. I don't work for them, but I happen to have at one time the president of the company come in at the school I was teaching. I was used to teach at Fashion Institute of Technology. And go to the website, www.panjiva.com. You can also go to Import Genius, www.importgenius.com, and you can get all kinds of information. What you need if you're going to be successful in international trade, you need to get the right kind of intelligence, and you can become a subscriber. And these various companies that are out there can provide you with the information that you need if you're an importer or exporter. You can find out about other companies' supply chains, what's going on, what carriers are they using, what kind of products are being imported or exported. You can find out about, HTSUS or harmonized system numbers. You can find out a lot of information, and a lot of these companies don't know that their information is being shared, and they should take steps to protect that information. But it's a boon to you. It's a benefit to you to be able to get your hands on this type of information. And now I've come across, another tool that you can make use of online to find out what's going on with international trade during this terrible time of the Corona-19 pandemic.
Kenny, two things as a follow-up. Number one, I think you mentioned the Panjiva and other companies. I think they call, at least we used to call them, the data mining companies.
Yes, Import Genius. Yes, you can find it. You can use a Google search engine, and you can find these companies. Again, I don't work for any of them. I just, I know of them. I have used them on occasion, and I just want the people out there to know about them. Also, when we get back into the swing of things, when this pandemic basically ceases to be such a terrible problem, you can make use of many good libraries. You can make good use of public libraries, or libraries that you can find in law schools, federal depositories, and they will open up their doors to you. If you want to find information about international trade, a very good place to go is the New York City Public Library. They used to have one on Madison Avenue, but they have all kinds of resources. You can make use of computers, you can make use of their subscriptions and so on. You can find out a lot about international trade. You need to know who's doing what and when and how and what have you, and a lot of this information is now available to you. Libraries can be free, but if you want to be a subscriber, some of the companies I just mentioned, go ahead. I also believe they have trial subscriptions. But you can also make use of this tool I mentioned to you, and it's very helpful. Things are changing. Yeah.
Okay, so this tool is just gives you the general sense of what's going on in the world. But you mentioned that you can also, if you subscribe to it, you can drill it down to the basic commodity of your interest, right?
That's correct. And other places you can go if you need international trade information, you can go to census.gov. That's another place. You can also go to the World Trade Organization website. There's a lot of places where you can get trade information, and it is indeed valuable. But I thought I'd bring this to your attention because it's free, and it's online, and it's really pretty easy to use.
Kenny, does it provide the information about the importer of record? Like, let's say I want to find out the companies that import brown sugar, for example.
Well, you can do that with some of the companies that I mentioned to you before.
But what about this one? This one in particular?
This one, I just found out about it, quite honestly. I found out about it over the weekend. I used it briefly. But its use is, again, you can see how things are rapidly changing in time, during these times of the pandemic. And as I indicated, you can find out such things from beef to bicycles, what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I myself have to explore a bit more. I've gone on its site a couple of times. But it's pretty fantastic from what I've seen. There's all kinds of information made available. And again, if you're going to be good businessmen and good businesswomen, you're going to be profitable, you've got to know where to go for information. Information is key. And quite unfortunately, international trade is not addressed by a lot of TV stations, and you can't find it in general, but there are places that you can go to find out more. And this is, I think you'll enjoy making use of this tool. The purpose of this presentation, COVID-19, is just to emphasize that everything is changing, and people don't like change. We know that. They get comfortable with something they know, and all of a sudden, thanks to this virus, things have changed very much in terms of transportation, in terms of warehousing, in terms of all kinds of things. And I'll talk a little bit more about what's going on.
The second follow-up comment on what you mentioned, and I think you kind of implicitly said it already, is that when you mentioned that some companies are not even aware that information that they have is public, some of the information doesn't have to be public. There is a privacy branch within the U.S. Customs and Border Protection.
That's correct.
If you make a particular application and you can get away with taking certain, not all of it, but a lot of private business confidential information will not be shown. And Ken, I believe you do that as well. So if someone calls you up to help with that, you can give a hand with this particular service, right?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I do that, and so does Yuri, and it's called an Ocean Manifest Confidentiality Request. And this is something that you can file with Customs. It's good for imports and exports. It can keep your company's information safe. Customs is basically going to sit on this information and not give it out to people. But you've got to send in a request, and this can be done. You can contact Yuri, you can contact me with how this should be done, because again, your information is very valuable. Years ago, I used to be with U.S. Customs, and I remember people coming in, and I used to ask to take a look at Ocean Manifest. They wanted information about what was coming in, what was coming out of the country. Couldn't give that information to them, but life has changed, and now many customs authorities, most of them around the world, are sharing information, importers and exporters information, at least in terms of information that's presented in manifest. And you can keep your company's information quiet, okay? So you make a request for confidentiality, and you'll have to do this every 2 years. And maybe one day we can have a little webinar about that, but it's terribly important. And remember that there's a way that you can safeguard your company's information.
All right, so and again, companies like Panjiva, and I'm not sure if this one, I know that I was trying to get you to tell me if they disclose that manifest stuff. But companies like Panjiva, they are buying this information from customs for a fee, and they are making it publicly available to subscribers.
That's right. They get raw information from customs. A lot of these companies hire outstanding people who are out of places like MIT, Stanford, all top-notch colleges, and they filter the information. As a matter of fact, in many cases, they later on sell the information back to governments so their criminal investigators can carry out investigations.
Okay, so I think we can move on, Kenya, right? To a slide which is next.
Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, take this, again, that site, take a look at it. And COVID is changing everything. And, it's hoped that with the vaccine, some kind of vaccine is going to come along sometime soon. But it looks like things are going to be sort of upside down, topsy-turvy for a little while longer. And we know that there have been changes in terms of international trade, not just because of the COVID virus, but because of some recent trade agreements. And about 2 weeks ago, China and 14 other countries agreed to set up the world's largest trading bloc, and this encompasses nearly a third of all economic activity. Again, it's hoped that this bloc is going to help the world come out of this pandemic. It's going to lead to recovery. And China is going to benefit by really leading what's known as the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Again, that's a Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. It's known as RCEP, and that was signed about 2 weeks ago. And again, there's 14 countries besides China. With the group, with this bloc, they're already going to take low tariffs, and they're going to work further, and they're going to lower them over time. And this is something that you should keep an eye out on, because China is asserting itself. India may actually join this bloc in the near future, but right now the RCEP has got about, it covers more than 2 billion people, and close to a third of all trade and business activity. It may go to 3.6 billion if India joins. India has been reluctant to join because it has problems at home. India, like many countries around the world, are experiencing populism. People no longer like globalization, and they want to put a stop to a lot of these free trade agreements. And you're going to see that this is a problem we're going to have here in the United States. President-elect Joe Biden is going to have to address trade. He may not want to in the near future, but again, he's been talking about the importance of trade. But if you're talking about free trade agreements, it may incite large numbers of American citizens out there. They don't like the fact that America has deindustrialized so, and they're not really in the mood to hear about free trade agreements. But you can expect this to happen, perhaps not in the first year. And you can look forward to, I believe, that the United States is going to come to some kind of agreement with the UK, United Kingdom. Why? Because of Brexit. And it looks like UK has signed an agreement with Canada recently. And in terms of other free trade agreements out there, well, the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement that went into effect this July. That's another one, NAFTA 2.0. And not too long ago, about a year ago, the United States signed a free trade agreement with Japan. So these trade agreements do take place. They don't get a lot of coverage if you're watching television, but they are really terribly important.
All right. So just a quick comment on, or rather the question. So it looks like you mentioned that face mask is #1 export for China.
Yeah.
So those folks who are curious about, I know you mentioned it in a way where you have other textile articles. I just wanted to drive the point home. This is a classification of the PPE equipment for face masks, respirators, and then chapter 63, and currently 7% duty, which is a regular duty. We are not talking about other stuff which may or may not be out there.
Yeah, with PPE, the United States government is trying to bring in more personal protective equipment. We're talking about such things as face masks, goggles, with gloves, etc. The United States does not make enough of PPE. It's not done domestically. There is an act on the books. It's called the Defense Production Act, and it's an act that goes back to the Korean War, and it could allow the United States government, the federal government, to basically order companies to produce PPE, but the government doesn't want to go that route. So right now, people are looking to import PPE into the United States. And again, Customs and the FDA are trying to make things easier, and they have in many ways. And you can find information at the Customs website, www.cbp.gov, and the FDA website, www.fda.gov, trying to make things easier. But there's not enough PPE to go around, and many people are looking to source PPE in countries that, well, they haven't really looked to. And they're not traditionally looked at. China produces a lot of PPE, but it has also nationalized in many ways, or medicalized its supply chain. China, like a lot of countries out there, have imposed export restrictions. They're not allowing certain PPE to be exported to the United States and other countries. So right now, the United States, the importers here are looking to countries like Malaysia, even India. Ireland used to provide a lot of PPE too. Sometimes it can be hard to get right now, and there are lag times when it comes to manufacture of the goods. And then got to be very careful if you're going to be importing PPE that you don't import counterfeit PPE. You want to make sure that you have PPE that works, because Customs is taking a look at shipments of PPE, and if they think that the products are not functioning properly, or that they're going to contact the Centers for Disease Control and actually test things like masks. And there have been a few seizures. Well, there was a big one in Chicago a couple of months ago, about $500,000 worth of PPE that came in, and the officers thought at first, hey, this stuff could be counterfeit. And again, Customs is looking very carefully at counterfeit goods, but the masks were not working properly, and for that reason Customs detained and seized. Also, when it comes to exporting PPE from the United States, we have an agency that a lot of you may not be familiar with, the FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. They can stop, or they're working with Customs, and quite often they're detaining would-be or prospective exports of PPE. They're making determinations as to whether or not the PPE should be allowed to be exported. There are all kinds of exceptions. One of them is the 3M company, but Yuri has got something up on the screen right now, and he's brought up information regarding FEMA. And this is important, and there is certain PPE that is subject to inspection.
Kenny, I think for the sake of fairness and objectivity, you mentioned that China and other countries, they regulate the exports of PPE. The agency that does the same thing in the United States is FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Administration.
Yeah, basically doing the same, and they're making determinations. FEMA is looking at commercial shipments, and it has stopped shipments from leaving the United States. The United States government it's been looking for PPE. I mean, you see what's happening right now, the number of COVID cases. I mean, all over the place right now. We've got millions and millions of people infected. Right now, it's believed that the number of COVID cases may be 7 to 8 times greater than what's being reported. So it's a serious, situation we're in. And unfortunately, things were not taken seriously a while ago. And we should have more PPE here. And there are all kinds of opportunities for those who can import PPE successfully, but you've got to be aware of what to do and what not to do. And that's why, again, information's important. And you can go to the Customs website. They have a special page, and that's the same thing with the FDA. And again, both agencies are trying to make it easier, a lot easier to bring in PPE. But we have a problem, and PPE has changed everything. And right now with China, China is on the ascendancy. It's growing. And global trade, unfortunately, right now is expected to decline by 20%. There was something on the news the other day about the economy of the UK, and it hasn't been this hard hit in 300 years. Basically, the only economy out there that is growing is China. The United States has taken a great big hit, so the EU countries. I mean, I believe this year the GDP is going to be down by about, I think in the United States, it could be 3.4, 3.7%, and it's expected in the EU to be down by as much as 6 or 7%. So countries are taking big hits, and a lot of people are saying that the one country that's going to help with recovery, that's going to lead the world out of this mess, is China. So we'll see. But China is doing its utmost right now, in many respects, to protect its own people. It wants PPE for its population in case it's needed. So a lot of companies that want to export PPE, well, they've got to be registered with the Chinese government. And again, the Chinese are making certain that PPE goes to certain countries and not to others. For those who've been reading about global trade agreements, you see that China and Australia are now at it. Again, China and Australia had a free trade agreement going back to 1985. And it's supposed to be updated. Unfortunately, there's a row right now between the Chinese and Australians.
Kenny, I wanted to kind of take your point your attention to this word that you said, the deglobalization, which is an interesting word. I remember going back to the early streams that we've done together. We established when we discussed Bretton Woods system. We kind of established that there was a shift away from the liberal free trade paradigm, and I guess that new word deglobalization describes this shift as well. It's interesting to see it because we heard of such buzzwords as decoupling, right? Trade wars, but deglobalization is a new kid on the block, sounds like.
Well, it's a word that's being bandied around, a term. Again, I made mention this slide. I use this presentation in a course I teach at Brew College, City University of New York. And we've been talking about deglobalization, and at first a lot of people were shaking their heads, what are you talking about? Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of people are not familiar with the term neoliberalism or globalization, and basically it's global capitalism. But right now there's a shift in among many people. They don't want globalization as much. They want their countries to be more self-sufficient. Right? So in fact, many people all over the world are becoming more nationalistic. Their populism is alive and well. It's alive and well in the United States, and many people are stating that, you know what, the country ought to be able to do a lot by itself. Don't rely that much on imports, and let's export a lot more. Well, yeah, we saw what happened in the last couple of years. And the United States government has imposed all kinds of tariffs on goods coming into the United States, and they're really punitive in nature. They're sharp. I mean, they cost a lot of money. And again, the Chinese don't pay for tariffs on goods coming into the United States from China. But we've had, through the Trump administration, we've had these Section 201, 232, and Section 301 tariffs. And it's basically, politicians are looking for a way to explain why it is that the American economy is in decline. What's happened? So they have to point to actors, and they have to point to different people in different places. And this is what's been happening in terms of China. Many people pointing a finger in China's direction and say, if it wasn't for you, it wasn't for your economy, we would have jobs here right now. So America right now, very insecure. People are wondering if they're going to have a place in this society and place in this world in terms of jobs, in terms of benefits, health insurance, etc. These are kind of scary times, and people are alarmed, and politicians are saying, hey, not us. Look to somebody else. Look to the Chinese. Or they'll point the finger at other immigrants. Maybe not other, but they'll point the finger at immigrants coming into the country saying, listen, these people are taking your jobs. Is there going to be more manufacturing in the United States? Well, a lot of politicians say this is what we want to do. We want to make it possible for you to have the kind of lives that your fathers and grandfathers had. We can go to work, that you don't need to have a dozen years education to get yourself a good paying job. Why should you not have this kind of life? So they tell people that, listen, we're going to stop imports. We're going to make it very difficult for the Chinese. And it's hurt a lot of businesses here. Quite often businesses can't get the products they need, or they can't get the materials here that they need to produce goods here in the United States. But perhaps the biggest enemy to a lot of manufacturing, or would-be manufacturing in the United States, is automation, robotics. Okay?
Kenny, so going back to your slide, the last line, I think worth mentioning, we talk about the decline in the two-way trade. I think it follows up on the statistics which I will bring up on the screen.
Yeah. Well, what happens? The country imposes tariffs, steep tariffs on goods coming into the country. Well, there's going to be retaliation. Other countries are going to say, okay, you want a trade war? Here you go.
Well,
And they retaliate, and this hurts our exporters, American exporters, because they can't export their goods as easily. They just, if the people overseas are facing big import duties, our exporters here get hurt.
all right, so let's take a look at the numbers, right? This is a Census Department, so this is the official government agency, bureau rather, which is required to compile this stuff. So we have 2020, which, well, the latest are the September, but we can kind of see as compared to we have negative trade balance of 222 billion as opposed to 345 billion just to 2019.
Yeah.
So okay, so let's take a look at one more. We have 418. So we can see that, and this is when Trump is in place, right? 2017, Trump is around, but he probably just assumed his duties, so the trade war didn't get the full kickstart. But essentially, so here it is. Here are the numbers. So essentially, what we see is the tendency of the trade balance with China. So we're talking about China, not in general, to decline. Now the question is, so you're saying it's because of COVID, because of trade war, or both?
This is something that's been going on for decades. There has been deindustrialization in the United States. It's a topic that's not usually put to people. They turn on televisions. They don't read about it much in their newspapers. But this is an ongoing problem. It's been so for a long time. I mean, people look at their towns, they look at cities, they look at their regions, and they ask, what happened to all the factories? What happened to the manufacturing that we used to do? And they can't explain. They don't know why these things have happened. And again, you have to understand that people are never advised when a trade agreement is going to be signed. When a parliament or a legislature is going to go ahead and put together a trade agreement and sign off on it, it's never put forth to people. They have no say. They have very little say. And even in the United States, even going back to the North American Free Trade Agreement, it was Ralph Nader at the time, a consumer advocate, an attorney out of Harvard, this and that. He said to the United States Congress, listen, after the North American Free Trade Agreement, has anybody read this? And he offered $10,000 to somebody to read the agreement. As a matter of fact, one person took him up on it. It was a Republican. And he read the agreement. He was all in favor of NAFTA before he read the agreement, and then he said absolutely not. And he didn't want to go ahead with it. But this is not something that people are usually keen on, and it's not something that the news spends a lot of time on. International agreements, international trade, and basically people miss out on what's going on. You're not going to find it. It's not going to be front page news. Usually you have to go to page 20 if you're still reading newspapers. It'll be in the back of the paper, or it'll be someplace online, very difficult place to find. But it explains a lot what's going on in people's lives. They want jobs. Where are they? And we see that this factories, we see that industry, has been moving out of the country for quite a while, sometimes with the aid of the government. They've been relocating. They can be able to bring their goods back into the United States at a very low rate of duty. The average rate of duty for goods coming into the United States is about 1.1, 1.2%. Well, you combine that with cheap transportation, and the fact that companies can go overseas and they don't have to worry about unions and they don't have to, in many cases, environmental standards. Well, you can see why companies went abroad. It was to maximize profit. And they bring things back into the U.S. And again, now, there's a change I just mentioned about this new agreement, this Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the RCEP that China's heading. We may find a lot more companies leaving certain countries and moving to Southeast Asia. There's a lot of money and there's a lot of opportunity in Southeast Asia. You're talking about 1/3, this trading bloc is going to encompass 1/3 of economic activity. So this is huge.
Well, what about, so you teach students, what's the general mood among the students? Because they're kind of like a bellwether of...
Well, fortunately, I teach a lot of international trade students, and they have a different perspective from a lot of Americans. They've traveled the world, most of them. They're at least in many cases, trilingual, and most of them have solid business backgrounds. These are people, most of the students I teach have graduate degrees. They understand what's going on. I mean, they're just interested in international trade. It can be very exciting. It presents all kinds of opportunities for people, make a lot of money, but many of them are interested in how does it work, how does it function. They want to know about the nuts and bolts, but they also want to understand what's going on at the present time. And again, this is something that's not often talked about. It's not often presented if you're watching television. You're not going to find out much about it on Facebook. You got to go looking for it. And again, politicians don't want to emphasize trade agreements. They try to put it in the rearview mirror. They don't want people really to be involved when it comes to the creation of trade agreements. I don't think they ever present them for a referendum, people's votes. It's not going to happen. Usually most trade agreements happen in the dead of night, usually the holiday season, usually close to midnight.
I know that you kind of took a bird's eye view on the COVID-19 trade war and general balance of trade situation. You also went a little bit into the reasons and public awareness, but business-wise, let me get that slide on the screen. This particular segments that you talk about, as far as businesses are concerned, I think there is a message that you're trying to say that, listen, folks who work in those industries, times of change are coming.
Yeah, it's changing. I mean, right now we have medical devices. That's because they're still going to be very much in demand. All kinds of medical equipment is going to be in demand. Americans also have to think about possible shortages when it comes to pharmaceutical products. You might have read or saw in the news the other day that Canada said no to President Trump when it comes to large quantities of drugs being exported from Canada to the United States. The United States, when it comes to when it comes to making pharmaceutical products available to the American public, well, Americans pay anywhere from 2.5 to 4 times more than anybody else on the planet. And Trump wanted to do something about the situation, and he thought it would be possible for Canada to send more drugs into the United States, lower prices. The Canadians said no, we need pharmaceutical products for ourselves. So there's not going to be a lot happening there. And then there were some states, I think the state of Maine, tried to enter into an agreement. I believe it was the province of Quebec. They have people up there, many of them are senior citizens. They don't have enough money. They're making decisions. Do I eat? Do I get medication? I need Lipitor. I need something for my blood pressure, what have you. And many people are finding it difficult to buy the medication that they need. Well, Canada has a different system, but they just the Canadians put their foot down and said, listen, this is something that you've got to address, U.S. There are companies here, and right now, yes, there are, but a lot of our drugs are coming in. They're imported right now. A lot of our research and development went offshore, and a lot of the manufacturing has also gone offshore. So people are buying pharmaceutical products online. There's a lot of counterfeiting going on, and people have to be very careful of that. So, yeah, and again, who also may have some problems with certain chemicals, getting them from certain companies, certain countries. Life is going to change. And then with regard to consumer products, consumer electronics, I put up, Japan does. We saw, personal computers, laptops, etc. They do quite a big business. But also, a lot of people are looking at China and saying, hey, it's getting a bit more expensive there. Should we be doing our sourcing in places like Vietnam? What about Thailand? What about this? What about that? Well, right now, take a look at the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership and get an idea of what's going on in those countries. And it is important to be aware of where there's a labor force that can accommodate whatever it is that you need to produce. And you've got to ask yourself, if you're going to go international, can my company function there? What kind of requirements are going to be put on my company? Well, how much investment do I have to make? Do I have to share information with the government? What do I have to do? And then you have to. It's complicated. International trade can be a lot of fun, but it's also complicated, and you've got to know where things are taking place.
So, I know that you had a great deal of discussion about Europe, but I just before diving into Europe, I just wanted to see if we can continue the topic of the business. So you mentioned segments, right? You mentioned the pharmaceutical, bio, and IT sectors. And so now, in this slide, in this particular slide, are you trying to say that they should reassess because of the labor shortages, or because the COVID and the trade was shown that the supply chains previously relied upon are no longer reliable, or perhaps need review?
Well, it also goes to many things, and that's why that online tool that I cited before may come in handy. COVID has changed a lot of things, including transportation. When it comes to ocean transportation, we're talking about 95% of all the things coming in or going out of the country. Many times, the ships, they can go to certain ports. Maybe they're functioning well. Maybe there's enough equipment. Maybe they haven't been devastated by COVID-19. Maybe there's a demand for certain products. You've got to know about that. The same thing with airlines. Can you get your goods shipped to a certain part of the world? What's it going to cost you? Everything is changing right now. I mean, I started out, with this class I had, we were talking about, and I know you've talked about it in the past, Yuri, post-World War II era. And we talked about Bretton Woods, and we talked about it even before World War II was ended. The Allies knew how the world was going to be divided up. They had made all kinds of decisions with regard to international trade. What was going to happen? What was going to happen to Germany? What was going to happen to Japan? The United States? Were we ever going to deal with Russia? Was Russia to be frozen out? And the answer was yes. Russia was to be frozen out for a long time. And then there was also the creation of new world organizations. I mean, we had General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. We had much later on, the WTO, but the IMF. We have all kinds of things. But people have to understand that change does not stop. And it's nice knowing history, but it's also necessary for businessmen and businesswomen to know what's going on today.
All right. So, with respect to what's going on, you also cite to this interesting figure, which pretty much says the following: the global trade has been a driver of global economic growth, expanding 3 times faster than global GDP for roughly 58 to 60 years, pretty much.
Yes.
So, to me, that's again, I may be wrong. I'm not. I mean, I had my undergraduate degree in economics, but I'm trying to me, that number is unhealthy, because number one, if you have trade which is faster than the production of goods and services, so for example, let's say I make this pen, right? I make this pen. I don't make any more pens. So, but what I do is I sell these pens like 3 times, pretty much, with the basic building block level. To me, that's a sign of speculation. So, and speculation, we know what speculation is, right? We lived through the Asian currency crisis of 1996. We lived through the Russian bonds crisis 1997. We had Soros run on the Bank of England 1989 or 92. We had our market almost crashed down in 1987. After that, we had a number of crises, culminating into the derivatives crisis in 2008, and so all this, what you're saying here, is kind of like providing another evidence that whatever the system that we lived in is unstable, and to me that means that what's going on in the world, whether you supporter or the opponent or pro-opponent, to me what it says is that we cannot live like that anymore. This is unsustainable.
No, that's true. You're right. We have to go. Maybe we'll have to go towards. It's on another slide. A circular economy. But the problem is, it's global capitalism. Capitalism has, started out in the West. We started talking about it. Started out in Europe, North America, Japan, and it's been moving. Capital goes wherever it wants, and it has been gravitating towards China, Southeast Asia, and so on. Things have changed for people, and it's been explosive growth in China. I mean, many times we don't know that as Americans. We don't get to know much about China. It's not shown on television, but there's a lot going on there. And then the Chinese have also, they're canvassing the world. There's all kinds of trade agreements. One I just mentioned, set up 2 weeks ago with 14 other countries. It's quite something. They're spreading around money. They have quite a lot of influence, and even lend money. But you're talking about a state capitalism, and they lend money to the United States. We buy their goods. This is what's going on. But we're not a manufacturing. Yes, we do manufacture certain things. We do have a reputation in certain areas. The United States is the #1 weapons exporter. There's certain things that we do we're very good in. But when it comes to a lot of consumer goods, no, not so anymore. And another thing, too, which is very strange about the United States, 95% of all manufacturers are not exporting. Why is that? Many times, a lot of people are wondering why. Do they need more assistance? Are they afraid of export laws and regulations? What is it? In many cases, a lot of American products are not really highly valued around the world. And a lot of people have problems to say with food from the United States. If you're going to be importing, you should realize that, things have gotten a little better that way. Food imports into the United States, we have something known as Food Safety Modernization Act, which went into effect really fully in 2017. And foods that are being imported now are supposed to be up to U.S. standards. They're supposed to match the food that's being produced here. That's great. But there are industries here that, U.S. Customs pays a lot of attention to. Why does the U.S. Customs still care so much about shoes? Okay, shoe imports. We don't manufacture shoes here anymore. What's going on? Wearing apparel. Okay? In the city, garment center, etc. Yeah, we were still making a lot of garments as late as the 1980s, 1990s, or so on. Then it sort of got flattened. So there are industries that are being still looked at very closely by the U.S. government. Food is going to be looked at very closely. But things are shifting right now. The United States is importing, and it's going to continue to import a lot. Why? Because, we need that. And we're seeing a lot of in the way of food imports. But when it comes to manufacturing here, we don't really have an industrial policy. Okay? Our biggest industry in the United States is finance. It's not manufacturing. The big money is to be made in finance.
Okay, so looking at the slide then, which kind of supports what you're saying, but again, just to drive the point home, you do mention in the slide that U.S. imports declined from China, but they're on a rise from other parts of the world.
That's correct. I mean, Japan, for instance, right? We have that trade agreement with it, the United States, and then just a few years ago, a trade agreement with South Korea as well. And India has gotten closer to us as well. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fluctuation. That's why this online tool should be of interest to people. Change is always going to occur.
Okay, the online is fine, but I haven't looked at the online tool with a great deal of detail, but what I did look was the Census department. So this is a different table from the one we've seen before. This is a table of the total US, not just with China, but with the total one.
Trade goods in the world.
So what we're seeing again, the 2020 we have the trade balance of almost the 650 billion in the negative side, so more imports than exports, which is down from 850 billion, give or take, for 2019, and in 2018 it was even bigger, and so in 2017 it was smaller by 15 billion. But basically what we see here is, if we're looking at the world statistic, world trade, I don't think we can make a conclusion that that while the trade with China goes down, the other world picks up the slack. I think the whole
yes.
Yeah, the whole thing is is lesser. So it's not like production stopped in China, picked up in Turkey. According to the table that we've just seen, the whole production thing is going down because of the whole balance. In other words, the whole trade flow is much lesser, right? This is what I think.
Well, there's also another factor we have to consider. What about consumers? Are they going to have the money to spend on the items they want?
Well, that's another thing. I think you missed those streams, Kenya.
No, I know, but I'm just saying this is a big part of it. I mean, again, if you...
Right,
yeah.
but those... so where do those money come from? So we all know that the money are being generated two ways without going into the complexity of bank multiplier effect, which generates money. The major source, of course, is a generation of money through the Federal Reserve, which does it through the bond program in cooperation with Department of Treasury. So monetary policy is Federal Reserve, the fiscal policy is Treasury, and sometimes those money are being recycled by, for example, Chinese, which are returning those money by buying bonds. I'm not sure what their foreign currency reserves are today, but fairly recently the dollar foreign currency reserves for China, People's Republic of China, were like 70%. So I think they are less now because of all this trade wars, but nevertheless, you to your point, you said, all right, so where are the people gonna get money? Well, we see no stimulus checks, right?
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope that the U.S. Congress, which many people think is broken, can do something for average people out there. That's important because, again, we have a consumer society, but without consumers with money, we have problems.
Well, okay. Well, of course, obviously, we're here just to get a general sense of what's going on, and we do not have all the answers, but I think we can fairly well conclude that whatever is going on in the world is not very healthy for the trade. It's also going to be push a lot of businesses to change. You mentioned in your presentation that it will change the supply. They have to reevaluate their supply chains because
right, and they have to think about where they're going to source from. I mean, again, they may not be able to rely on the areas of the world in which they had sources. I mean, manufacturers move, and you've got to think about costs. You know, again, capital goes wherever it wants, and companies are going to locate where they can make a profit. It's just that way. So where's it taking place right now? Are companies actually coming back to the United States? I mean, that's what USMCA is supposed to be about. It's supposed to, some of it with regard to the automobile industry, things are supposed to get better for the auto industry here. Well, we'll see. You know, there's a lot going on, but again, I'd like to get back to this tool that I mentioned, just something for people to think about. Everything is in a state of flux, and that doesn't sit very well with a lot of people. But what we do know is that, yeah, there's going to be, it looks like there's going to be many countries are going to have a difficult time of it for the next year or two, and then there's going to be a recovery. The question is, what kind of recovery are you going to have? Is it going to be a V-shaped recovery? Is it going to be a U-shaped recovery? Is it going to be an L-shaped recovery? And who's going to be leading? Who are going to be the world leaders when it comes to international trade right now? I mentioned the Chinese are positioning themselves, but as my PowerPoint presentation points out, so is the EU. The EU is doing a lot of things as well, and it has a Green Deal, and a lot of countries are cooperating. I read today that George Soros has some problems with the EU right now, in large part because of Hungary and Poland. They seem to be going in different directions, but we have countries working together to address such issues as recycling, to address reforestation, to address the Green Deals, is what is known as Europe. And they're thinking about the future. And they've also, again, we have certain countries that do not eschew, they do not negate the idea of global climate change. And these are countries that are trying to do something. I think the United States is going to get back on track, but it's going to take a little while. And I think the United States is going to be a bit gun-shy of any new free trade agreements, at least for a little while. But I just want to bring to people's attention, there are things going on in the world that you may not hear about. And one of them is the RCEP, that Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Start paying attention to it. And yeah, that's it. Everything's in a state of flux, whether you like it or not. And you got to find sources of information that you can depend on. And that's key if you want to stay in business and you want to be profitable.
So based on your slide, you mentioned 2023. Why is it 2023? Why is
well,
that?
a lot of people think they're looking at vaccines. The industries of all sorts have taken quite a hit. You know that in the United States we have what 1/3 of all people are behind in rent. I mean, for their apartments or their mortgage payments. This is big. This is huge. We have in a situation like this. What is the real unemployment rate? Is it really, like the government tells us, 4.6%, whatever? That's nonsense. It's probably 5 times that, 6 times that in reality. And you've got to, again, if you're going to be involved in international trade, you also have to be very suspicious of government statistics. Okay, politicians lie. That's what happens. But you've got to, use your eyes. Go out, network. Look for yourself. And then find that information that you need. And again, it may not be in the places that you can easily access, but know that there are sources of information out there. So we're going to see whether or not we have a V-shaped recovery, a U-shaped recovery, or an L-shaped. We don't want an L-shaped recovery.
Yeah, I think that's the most depressing one, right, Kenny?
Yeah, but it is going to bounce back. But the question for you, if you're in business right now, is that who are you going to be doing business with? Where are you going to do business with? What are you going to, when you're looking at the future, and God knows, nobody knows how to predict the future. I mean, not really. I mean, it's a joke. If you want to make God laugh, tell him about your future plans. All right? Nobody has a crystal ball. I have a slide in there about that. It's very difficult for most people to see the future, especially if it concerns themselves. Sometimes we let enthusiasm get in our way. Sometimes we don't look at things soberly. Sometimes we're a bit rah-rah-ish, and so on. But things are going to continue to change. It's just that things are happening in different parts of the world. Traditionally, it was the West, okay? But capitalism has basically moved. And it's in many ways, it's left the United States, it's left Europe, it's left even Japan. Okay, and where has it gone? Well, look at where all the growth in the world is taking place. And it's not just China. We can look to Asia, large parts of the Middle East. We can also look to Africa. And that's a continent many people are very interested in. They've got all kinds of resources. They've got labor resources. They've got all kinds of things over there. And many companies are looking to that part of the world. So things just change. Everything is in a state of flux.
Okay, so you mentioned real briefly the circular economy. And this is like one of your, I think, suggestions about about dealing with the change. This is one of the ideas that is out there. Can you talk a little bit more about the circular economy?
Not so long ago there was an article coming out of Europe. The Europeans want to make use of items. They want to make use of them for many years. They don't want throwaway. They don't like planned obsolescence. When something breaks down, they want to be able to repair it. And they don't want to get rid of cell phones. Why should you have to get a new cell phone or an iPhone every couple of years? What's the point in that? How do you repair them? How do you refurbish them? And what do you do with the stuff you throw away? It causes a lot of pollution, and a lot of people are very worried about that. What do you do? Why not recycle a lot more? Why? And again, Europeans are also looking to get away from fossil fuels. The idea, again, they have something called a Green Deal, and they're looking for new sources of energy. They're looking to do things better. They do take into account global climate change. Right now we're dealing with a pandemic, and there are going to be other ones because of global climate change. We here in the West, I'm talking about the United States, we find it hard to believe that there can be there can be these horrible diseases coming about. Well, yes, everything is changing. I mean, customs authorities, health authorities all around the world are being introduced to insects and things they've never seen before. I'm at the port of New York. I think every year 13 insects are found that have never been here before. Many of them there are no predators here. They have no enemies here, and they spread. Everything's changed. I mean, you look at the state of Florida, you look at the coastline, you look at the waters off New York, and so when you find zebra mussels, I mean, that was introduced, probably a ship from the Black Sea. We have lionfish off the coast right now. They're not even supposed to be in that ocean. We've got all kinds of things going on. We've got people who also introduce all kinds of organisms and wildlife into environments in which they shouldn't be. So things are in a state of flux, and people don't know what to do about it. But there is global climate change. The U.S. military is aware of it. And in the near future, we're going to see such things as water shortages. There are going to be water wars. There's not enough of it to go around. Okay? You have to ask yourself, the system that we have, where we just take things, we take them, we manufacture, we throw them away, how much longer can we continue to do this? Maybe we should think about more of a circular economy where we get more use out of things and we can repair them, we can refurbish them, we can do these kinds of things. And the Europeans are also looking at, they have an emissions trading system, they're looking to put caps, it's the cap and trade principle, and the amount of greenhouse gases that can be emitted. And it's a possible solution. It's not perfect, but people are going to be able to pollute so much. If they don't pollute that much, they'll be able to sell their rights to pollute to others. That's one thing. But they're looking for ways to address what's going on right now. In the United States, things have pretty much come to a standstill the last couple of years. Nothing has happened. And it doesn't seem we're getting much from our legislature here. Okay? So these are just, I want you to just be aware of some of these things that are going on.
So that emission trading system, I think the body of law which paved the way is Kyoto Protocol, which pretty much legalized this trading system, which allowed countries to really sell carbon from one to another. So, but that has been talk since 1997. By the way, United States is not a part of it. But you see in the United States playing a bigger role in here, or in the emission trading system, or what?
I don't see it happening right away. I think the United States is going to have. There are possible solutions out there to many of the problems that we have here in the United States, but the politicians don't have the vocabulary, and the American public is not familiar or have never thought about some of the solutions that are out there. In many ways, there seems to be a news blackout. The rest of the world doesn't seem to matter. I mean, yes, we are beside ourselves here. There is a lot of free-floating anxiety and concern and what have you. But there are things that we got to pay more attention to. And the Europeans are trying to do it. Will they be successful with this new Green Deal and everything that they're doing? Well, I imagine they're going to be partially successful. The other thing they're trying to do is pay attention to forests, and they're trying to reforest Europe. They're trying to introduce wild animals that have not been there for many years. They're trying to preserve. You have to ask yourself, do you really want to have a system where all you do is extract, make things, and throw it away? Do you really want that system? How much longer can you continue to take from the earth? Okay, how much longer can you do this? Is it possible to have growth, super growth every quarter? Okay, this is what our system is all about. It's about growth every quarter. Is that possible in the long run?
Well, you mentioned this 260 billion a year.
Yeah.
And we're talking about euros, not dollars. So that's
Right, euros.
that's almost 300
Mm-hmm.
US dollars or even more. Um, I don't know, Kenny. It's a lot of money. Where do Europeans get their money from? Do they print them like United States?
Well, they're thinking of these
Federal
perpetual
Reserve?
bonds in the EU. They know they're going to have this big cost. They don't have the money, but they want to float these bonds, and they want to be able to pay the interest on them. They don't know if they're ever going to be able to pay them off completely. But yeah, there is a problem. There's a problem with money all over the world. How do you get it? Where does it come from? Who's got it? And again, if you want to understand politics, how do you understand politics? By asking two basic questions. Who's got the money, and how is it being spent?
Well, wow. So I think your presentation, at least on my end, made me more puzzled about the future, because my idea was to try to extrapolate what's going on and try to make my life easier by having a peace of mind that there is at least some trajectory going on.
There is. I just want to say, overall, the trajectory is, as I pointed out, is that you're finding capital leaving its traditional bases and it's traveling the world. Where has it gone? It's gone to China, and in large part it's gone to Southeast Asia. And that's where it's going. This is the long term. This is what's been happening over the years. And unless countries take certain steps to address their problems, maybe come up with a different thinking about, global capitalism. We talked a little bit about deindustrialization. What are people going to do? What are people going to do for jobs? And this is one of the reasons that, Americans are pushing back against trade. I mean, they don't know much about trade agreements, but they're pushing back. They don't want any more trade agreements. They don't want any more. Well, they really don't have a choice right now. But foreign goods, they're saying, why can't we create them here? Why can't they be made here? And then it's up to a lot of politicians to go out and explain, and they never do explain. Why can't these items be made here? A lot of it has to do with the cost. A lot of it has to do with the fact that if companies want to stay in business here, how are they going to be able to provide? How can they sell things at a price where people can afford and provide such things as health insurance to people? All right? Other countries are not burdened by this. Here in the United States, we may have to change our system a bit, but nobody's ready to talk about that. So, again, if you're a businessman, businesswoman, you have to ask yourself, okay, where's the manufacturing going to be going? Where can I source from? What's the transportation like? Okay, and what kind of modes of transportation are going to be affected in the future? Do I want my manufacturer, do I want my sourcing as close to the place where I'm importing as possible? And we've seen this happen in many cases. We've seen companies pull out of China and they've gone back to places like Mexico. Why? Because sometimes things are difficult. Supply chains are disrupted, and they're disrupted for all kinds of reasons. They can be storms, they can be wars, and they can also be the COVID-19 virus, and it has changed things. So that's what this is all about, and I just want everybody who's, the attendees to realize that everything is in a state of flux. Try to get the best information that you can, and, just pay attention to, again, this tool that I told you about, and then make certain, too, that you know how to access international trade information. And there's some good stuff out there. There really is. And don't believe, and many times you have to, you have to take with a grain of salt certain pronouncements from governments. They don't always tell the truth, okay? Not because they don't want to, but many times a lot of information is just interpretation. I mean, do I really believe the unemployment statistics of the United States? No. I don't think any sane person can. And you have to take it with a grain of salt, too. We talked about trade statistics. A lot of trade involves intercompany transfers and parts and what have you. That's a lot of that. But it is exciting, it is interesting, and take a look at this new agreement and make use of that tool.
So again, the new agreement is. Do you have a page number for that new agreement? I couldn't really find it.
So what?
The new trade agreement that you mentioned.
No, I don't have it, but it's called if you just want to put it into the Google search engine, it's RCEP. It's called the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, just RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. You can probably go into Google and come up with probably a dozen different articles on it. But it came into effect about 2 weeks ago. As I said, it's China and 14 other countries, and you're talking about covering, I think, right now 2 billion people. And if India comes in, it'll be 3.6 billion people. So India is also, it doesn't want to get on board right now. India has problems with its domestic population. They're upset. A lot of Indians don't want to compete with countries like New Zealand when it comes to dairy products and other things. India really is a land of small farms, and a lot of Indians are upset about what's been going on in the world. Okay?
All right, well, this trade agreement is interesting because it echoes your Asian agreement that you also have in your slides, but the idea behind it, from what I understood, was to create an alternative to create an alternative trade routes by unifying those regions to Europe.
Well, yes, you're making a good point. China has come back with some. For those of you who like history, you can read about the Silk Road. And China has
one
brought
belt, one way. Yes,
back. It is knitting the world together. It's looking for trade routes, and it's putting them together. It's establishing them. And so it's something. Go online too. Put in Silk Road into the Google search engine. You'll come up with articles about that. But the world is changing, and changing a lot.
All right. Well, let's try to be on top of things, meaning that trying to see what's going on with a critical eye.
Mm-hmm.
And have you? So you're doing this presentation in Baruch? Have you done it in Baruch?
Yeah, a lot of things like that. I mean, I had a lot of students address the old Silk Road, and again see what China's doing right now in terms of the new Silk Road, and how it's knitting together agreements with governments all over the world. And again, it's China right now is its economy. If you look at it, it's about the only economy that has been expanding. And I believe it's going to continue for a while. And, you'll see other, again, economies in Southeast Asia as well. We see what China is now doing. It's trying to assert itself militarily. We're looking at the Chinese Navy, a bunch of islands in the South China Sea. And right now, China is going nose to nose with Australia. And it may not sign into, it may not renegotiate the trade agreement that it has. So it's asserting itself right now. The West seems to be preoccupied with other matters right now. So keep an eye out on that part of the world. And again, also, take a look at Africa for those of you. There's a lot going on in Africa that doesn't often make the news. There's a lot of investment. There's a lot of resources there as well. So sometimes you have to look at places with,
Yeah, I think you were heavily, I don't know if you still are, involved with Africa. I think you even traveled to some countries and
yeah, as a matter of fact, I was there. I spoke last year at AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, and there's a lot of activity in West Africa. There's a lot of money pouring into that part of the world, and East Africa as well. And the Africans are putting together their own trade bloc, and they also want to export a lot more of their products to the West. Yes, they've dealt with Europe for many years, but they're also looking to, in many cases, the United States. And those are things like nuts and fruits and other kinds of items. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and it can be very interesting. But take a look at Africa as well. They have some new agreements. The African Growth and Opportunity Act, you can look that up. I think that it's going to last until 2025. But the Africans are very diligent. They're very intense and lovable, and they want to do more. They're very hardworking people, and they want to expand. They want to do a lot more in terms of exporting. All right.
Okay, Kenny. So I think we can wrap it up here because we're over our time limit. But thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. And
ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me. I certainly appreciate being here. Yuri, thank you very much for having me.
Okay, please come back, all right?
All right, will do. Take care. Bye
Take
now.
care. Bye. All right, everyone, thank you for attending. See you next week.